This dog stopped his owner from being taken off of life support. The reason why is shocking and will melt your heart. Monty had always been a happy, loving, and calm dog, despite not having the best start in life. He had been adopted from a rescue shelter when he was just 3 years old, after being removed from a home that had not treated him the best. The man who had ended up adopting the adorable pup, 37-year-old James, had fallen in love with the canine when he first went to the shelter with his family to find a pet. The calm but incredibly loving golden retriever had walked up to the front of his cage and sat down to watch James walk past. The minute the dog laid eyes on the man, he put his paw against the glass as if asking James to stop and look at him. From that moment on, James knew that he couldn't leave Monty in the shelter, and before long, the dog was a new member of his family. Monty and James became inseparable. They would do everything together, including napping on the sofa whenever they could and sneaking treats from the kitchen. Monty was extremely happy and couldn't have asked for a better second chance. Likewise, James couldn't have asked for a better dog to become a part of his family. One of Monty's favorite things to do was to watch James as he worked on various DIY projects around the house and in the garden. Often the pup would lie down and simply keep an eye on his owner, making sure that nothing too bad happened to him whilst he was working on his projects. One day, a particularly bad storm hit the town that James and his family lived in. Thunder, lightning, heavy rain, and howling winds battered James's home all night long. Eventually, when the morning came, the storm finally died away, and James was able to assess the house for any damage that might have been caused by the angry act of nature. Thankfully, the house seemed to be in a good condition, and all that the backyard needed was a bit of a tidy up from the stray branches and leaves that had fallen onto the ground from the trees around the property. However, as James set about completing this new task, Monty began to act very strange. The once docile and happy dog had started barking continuously at a nearby tree whose branches hung over a part of the garden. Any time that James tried to get near the tree, the dog would begin to growl at him, as if trying to keep him away from that part of the garden. Getting fed up with the animal's behavior, James took Monty inside and locked him in the house so that he could continue cleaning up the garden in peace. Meanwhile, the canine watched anxiously as his owner got closer and closer to the thick branches of the tree. All of a sudden, when James was right underneath a particularly large and thick branch, he heard a loud snapping sound. The man quickly looked up at the tree above him, but it was too late. The large branch had clearly become loose during the storm, and it snapped, falling right on top of James. The man let out a loud scream before falling silent. Monty began to bark furiously, pawing at the door in an effort to get out to his owner. James's wife, Millie, approached the dog to see what was wrong. However, once she was close enough, she was able to see James stuck underneath the branch in the garden. Immediately, the woman began to panic and rushed out to her husband to see if he was okay. But the man was unresponsive to anything that Millie said or did. The distraught woman quickly called an ambulance, explaining what had happened. Monty, however, lay down next to James, trying to give his owner as much comfort as he possibly could. Before long, an ambulance crew had arrived at James's house and loaded the man up into the van. Before the vehicle took off, though, Monty tried to sneak on board. He clearly did not want to be separated from his owner, as he worried he might never see the man again. Unfortunately, due to health and safety rules, the paramedics couldn't allow the dog to ride with them to the hospital, and so Monty was taken out of the van and put back in the house to wait for his friend's mum. Once at the hospital, the doctors determined that James had been hit on the head by the branch quite hard and that there was quite a bit of swelling on his brain. To combat the dangerous situation the man found himself in, James was put on life support so that the doctors could keep him alive and monitor his situation. However, as time went by, it looked less and less likely that James would wake up from his coma. During the time that the man was in the hospital, his wife was allowed to take Monty in to see him for a couple of hours during visiting times. Whenever the dog entered his friend's room, he would instantly jump up onto the bed and lie down with him. For hours on end, the dog would do nothing but stare at his unconscious owner, whining, and even licking the man sometimes in the hope that he would wake up. However, it seemed as if this would not happen. One evening, as Monty and Millie were sitting at home, Millie received a phone call. It was the hospital, more specifically, James's doctor. The doctor told Millie that as James had not shown any signs of life for the past few months, the best course of action would be to take him off of life support and let him pass on peacefully. Millie was distraught at this news and immediately burst into tears, catching the attention of Monty. The canine, as if knowing something was very wrong, walked up to the woman and began to offer her some comfort. Eventually, Millie calmed down enough to agree to what the doctor said and promised to go to the hospital the next day to make it official. The next morning, Millie got ready for the day and began to head off to the hospital for one final goodbye. As she was leaving the house though, Monty darted through the front door and took off down the road. Millie tried calling the canine, but he would not listen. The dog ended up running all the way to the hospital, at which point he managed to sneak into James's private room. Once on the man's bed, the dog began to growl and bark at any of the nurses or doctors who tried to get close to the unconscious man. Not long after Monty arrived, Millie ran into her husband's room, only to see the dog guarding the man as if his life depended on it. The woman tried to call Monty off of James's bed, but the dog would not listen. Just as the pup was being forcefully dragged off of James's bed, something amazing happened. The heart monitor started to pick up speed, and James's hands began to twitch. The doctors were amazed at what they were seeing. The chances of someone with James's condition waking up were slim, and yet it appeared as if it was happening. Suddenly, the man's eyes opened. James was awake. Millie immediately began to cry tears of joy and rushed to give her husband a hug. Monty wasn't far behind, jumping up on the man's bed and peppering him with kisses. James chuckled and hugged the two people who he loved most in the world. Fortunately, since he was awake, the doctors were able to treat him, and within a few weeks, James was able to go back home, so long as he rested and didn't do any strenuous activities. The man was finally able to go back to taking naps with his four-legged friend and give back all of the love and loyalty that the canine had shown him in his time of need. Millie and Monty were thrilled to finally have James back home, happy and healthy, and the pup was given many treats as a way to thank him for saving James's life. But all the dog really cared about was that he could live happily by his best friend's side once again. What an adorable story. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel for more. See you soon.